Hey, what's going on, GameLeapers? This is Coach JIZZ, and in today's upload, we're going to be discussing the win rate changes from patch 12.11 and the champions who got buffed and nerfed. So have they gotten a lot better? Have they gotten a lot worse? We will reveal all the details in this video, and interestingly enough, some of these champions who have been buffed or nerfed too much are actually getting hotfix changed, and that hotfix got released today. And it's time for you to get that ball comfort as well, guys, with Manscaped's Boxer Briefs. These guys spent 2 years designing the most comfortable challenger tier boxers on the market, and from their labs to your balls, their new boxers 2.0 are ultra soft, and they certainly make my package look even bigger. And because of these boxers, my balls have never felt better, so get around these as well. So the products that have been helping me print free LP this season, we have the star of the show, the lawnmower trimmer, and this bad boy right here is going to help you keep your bush in good shape, and thanks to its skin safe technology, it's going to greatly reduce the chances of you getting little cuts and nicks that can be annoying. Now, after you're finished with the downstairs region, you can move to your head and use the Weed Whacker ear and nose trimmer so you don't look like Arvin in public. And to finish everything off, guys, you get the anti-chafing ball deodorant and moisturizer, and you also get the spray-on toner, which is going to give your ball bag a luscious fragrance at the end of this process. And guess what? Because us at Manscaped are so nice, we're also giving you a chance to get 20% off and free shipping. All you have to do is head over to the Manscaped website, link down below, and use the code JIZZ, J-I-Z-Z. Do it for the nuts. So the hotfix changes for 12.11b, this is what Riot are calling it. We have 2 champion buffs and 2 champion nerfs. So the champions getting buffed, these are Kog'Maw and Ryze. And the hotfix buff to Kog'Maw is kind of like a semi-revert. So instead of being 7% at rank 5, it's going back up to 6.5%, but it is starting off with only 1 point in your Bioarcane Barrage at 3.5 instead of 3%. So this is definitely going to help Kog, but will this put Kog'Maw back in the picture? Because of the nerfs in 12.11, they've really destroyed the champion. So we'll have to wait and see what impact this actually has. Now for Ryze, who is the worst champion in the game, let's be honest, his Q's cooldown is getting reduced by a second. So from 6 seconds to 5 seconds, and your E's damage is also going to scale more of your AP. So these are definitely nice changes for Ryze, and Riot are trying to push this AP variant, because earlier in Season 12, the tank Ryze with Fimbulwinter, this was really strong, but with the Everfrost nerf and Ryze just being one of the most killable, if not the most killable champ on the Rift, will this make the AP version a little bit better? And no doubt it will, it's just that Ryze is in such a bad position at the moment that he'll probably still be bad despite these buffs. Now, as for the champion nerfs, we have Olaf, and because of the buffs in 12.11, they actually buffed his early game. So what Riot have decided to do is reduce the Q's armor reduction, down from 20% to 30% to a flat 20%. And also the shield you get from your W is going to scale less off your missing HP. So the Q's armor reduction is really targeting Olaf's mid to late game, so when enemy champions have a lot of armor. And the W shield nerf will hurt him at pretty much every stage of a game. But the issue is that Olaf is still going to be extremely strong in the early laning phase, and I don't really anticipate these nerfs to bring Olaf down in the pecking order. Now, Zeri is the other champion getting hotfix nerfed, and I kind of called this yesterday. Her win rates are absurd at the moment, so there are 3 nerfs here. So first of all, to your Q's AD, this is down by 5% at each rank. Also your passes, max HP percentage damage, this is down in the early game, and it's also scaling until level 18, no longer level 13, so you'll be getting to 15% a lot later. And Riot are also doing a semi-revert on your E's cooldown, increasing it by 2 seconds at each rank. And no doubt this will definitely impact Zeri's win rate, but to be honest, she will probably still be one of the best AD carries, if not the best. Now moving on to the win rate changes, guys, in the last couple of days, and let's start by talking about the champions who got buffed. So we'll go through these alphabetically. So first of all, let's talk about Aphelios and the buffs to his passive attack speed and lethality. They haven't really done that much, to be honest. His win rates may have improved by close to 1%, but the champion is still very vulnerable in a solo queue environment, and is just bettered by a lot of the AD carries. Now as for Caitlyn, this is a different story. So even though Riot gave her a few buffs, she's actually gone backwards in the majority of elos. So in Challenger right now, Caitlyn only has a 43% win rate, if that. And the reason for this is because Riot have actually taken out some of your power in the early game. This is when you're meant to be strong and lane bully, so the buffs really haven't benefited Caitlyn all that much. Now as for Gragas, the cooldown going down in your Q and E, this has been big for pretty much every single role, and also the AP ratio in your Q getting buffed, this has been big as well. This is why Gragas's win rate has increased by over 1.5%, but the issue is Gragas is still a burst-based champion, and in the durability meta, these champions are just unfavored, but he is definitely more playable. Now, as for Aurelia, who's one of the most polarizing champions in the game, Aurelia's win rate has improved close to 50% across the board. So it's gone up 1.25%, and that's because of the extra Q healing you're getting, and because your E's cooldown is down, which is giving you way more opportunities to kill your opponent during the laning phase, which is when you're really strong. Also, the Gore Drinker buff, so the haste going up in the Mythic passive, the Blade of the Ruined King buff, these have have all been great buffs for Aurelia, and the stats don't lie. Now, Lee Sin is a champion who has definitely improved since the buffs. So his base AD going up, and also his Q's damage, dealing more damage, and his win rates have improved by close to 2%. But the issue is, you want to get your head in there, you want to dive into the enemy backline, you just get peeled way too easily, and there are so many champions outperforming Lee Sin in the jungle, so he is still struggling despite the buffs. Now, one champion who is frothing the buffs in 12-11, this is Nunu, and his win rates have improved by over 3.5%, so his win rate is now over 51%. So that's a massive jump, and the reason for this is because of the extra Q healing from non-champions and champions. So jungle monsters, this is really good if you're playing jungle Nunu. From champions, this is really good if you're playing jungle Nunu, mid Nunu. Whatever iteration in Nunu, you are just 10 times better. And I guess your snowball barrages cooldown and later ranks going down, this is also nice, but we also have to consider, guys, the Balmy Cinder buff and the tank mythic buff. So if you're going Sunfire Aegis, which will probably be the case in pretty much every single game, because of the extra 100 HP this item is now giving you in Balmy Cinder gold, going down 100 gold, this means for your first base, you'll probably be getting this all the time. It's very, very easy to actually get. So massive buffs for Nunu in 12-11. Now, a champion who's improved almost as much as Nunu, close to 3%, this is Rakan. And all of the buffs to Rakan, there were 4 of them, have been more than welcome. But the one in particular that really stands out, that is the W cooldown buff. So this cooldown going down, and this is the ability you're maxing first, going to be huge. More engage, more disengage, and also the buffs to your Q and E. Really good Rakan players are going to make use of this, and this is why his win rate is close to 50% across the board. Now, we did mention Ryze a little bit earlier, guys, in terms of the hotfix buffs he's getting, but the actual 12-11 change, where they buffed your E's AP ratio and also the mana cost, well, these have actually done the opposite. They've actually nerfed Ryze because his win rate has gone down by 0.1%, and maybe that's because his pick rate has gone up, but the champion is just in such a bad spot at the moment. Going AP Ryze, it's more like a trap than anything, and the hotfix buffs that we mentioned at the start, that's probably just a trap as well, so sorry to all you Ryze mains for the continued pain. Now, moving on, we have Samira, whose late game got buff, so your AD per level, this went up, and also your Q's damage is scaling more off your attack damage. So as you start getting into the mid to late game and you start getting more attack damage items, Samira can really shine. And because she's a very snowbally divey champion, she really needed these, to be honest, because if you fall behind in the early game, it is just GG, but before these changes, it was GG anyway because you got peeled so easily. So these buffs have really helped her, and this is why her win rate is over 51%. Now, next up, we have Sylas, whose win rate's improved by close to 2%, and that's of course because of the plethora of buffs that Sylas got. So his mana cost and his W going down by 10, the heal on his W scaling off more AP, really good for his scaling, and also the cooldown going down at early ranks. Even though you're probably going to max this first in most matchups, this is still really useful, particularly for your early levels, which is when you are typically weaker. Also, your E's cooldown going down by a second, and that's what this champion is about. Ability hates cooldowns. Huge buffs for Sylas. Even if Everfrost has been nerfed pretty hard, the champion's win rate is now back to around 50%, so really nice buffs. Now, a champion similar to Nunu, guys, we have Tahm Kench coming in next, and because of the tank mythic changes, so the Sunfire Aegis, Frostfire Gauntlet, Turbo Chem Tank, and then Balmy Cinder, these have really helped. But also the buffs to Tahm Kench himself, so the passive on hit damage going up, the Q ceiling, and also your ultimate, the shield being bigger, this has meant that Tahm Kench in the top lane as a support, as an AD carry with maybe a fasting center next to you, he is one of the strongest champions, boasting a win rate over 52%, and his win rate has gone up over 4% in the last couple of days. But a champion who's improved even more than Tahm Kench, and he's actually improved the second most in the last 48 hours, this is Taric, whose win rate has improved by over 5%. This is a huge jump, and I think really the big change out of all of them is the buff to your stun duration in your Dazzle, and also the cooldown going down as well. So the cooldown has gone down by 2 seconds at each rank, and the stun duration, even though it's a quarter of a second longer, this change happened for Xerath not that long ago, and it saw a big increase in win rate. So I think that's the real key to this. And of course, your Q's heal per charge, scaling more of your maximum HP, and the mana cost going down to 60 at all ranks. These are very nice, and this is why Taric's win rate, just like Tahm Kench, is over 52%. Now, 2 more champions who got buffed in 12-11, guys. One of these is Tryndamere, and his win rate has improved by over 2.3%. But even though it might be 49.5% overall, the champion is still going to struggle. With the Balmy Cinder buffs, the tank mythic buffs, bruises still being very strong, especially those of Divine Sunderer and Conqueror, maybe those champions in the top lane with lethal tempo as well, like Kayle. It's still very difficult to make Tryndamere work, but the buffs to his Q and also his ultimate's cooldown have certainly helped. And the last champion kind of has the same story as Tryndamere. Even though Xin Zhao has been buffed and his win rate is increased by almost 3% to close to 49%, it's only 49% overall still, and the reason for this is because you are a dive-based champion, a bit like Lee Sin. You want to get your head in there, but at the moment, it's really not about that. So even if your passive's healing is scaling off your AD, even if your W, the second part of it, is dealing more damage in terms of its base damage, up by 10 at all ranks, and doing more damage based off your AD and AP, if you're a real Chad, and even if the mana cost is down at all ranks, it's still still doesn't change the fact that Xin Zhao in this meta, he would need to be Giga OP and receive some Giga buffs to actually be one of the premier champions, so he's still struggling despite these changes. Now, as for the champions who got nerfed, guys, let's start off with Brand, whose win rate has dropped to close to 2%. Reason for this is because his burn damage has been nerfed, and also Liandry's Anguish's base burn damage, this has been nerfed as well. And because there's so much HP in the game, this was probably justified, but his win rate is still around 51.5%, so more than playable. Now, speaking of playable, well, this champion is probably unplayable because of the nerfs in 12.11, this being Gwen. And Gwen received a few nerfs, but the big one is the cooldown refund on your first attack from your skip and slash. This is now 50%, so it's 10% off. So this is the big one here. The bonus armor and magic resist while you're inside your hallowed mist, even though this has been nerfed, and the cooldown as well, going up at later ranks, these are probably more placebo than anything, so the E-nerf has resulted in Gwen's win rate going down over 3% to just a lowly 45.5% overall. Now, kind of the opposite to Gwen, one champion who has been nerfed, but probably got buffed because of the Gore Drinker buffs, this is Rast Red Kayn. And even though we don't have the exact win rate changes, guys, let me just say this, the Kayn's win rate in Challenger at the moment in over 200 games is over 62%. That's right, 62%. This champion definitely did not get nerfed in 12.11, and because the meta is just so favorable for Red Kayn, the extended fights, the Conqueror stacking, the multiple cooldowns being used, makes him unkillable and just so difficult to deal with. But one champion who's a lot easier to deal with, we mentioned him at the start of the video, this being Kog'Maw. And because of the hotfix buffs to his W, maybe this is going to bring Kog'Maw back into play, but the two nerfs to his Q, in terms of the armor and magic resist reduction, and of course the passive attack speed you get, and the Bao Arcane Barrage on hit damage, Kog's win rate has dropped over 4%, so he's gone from the best AD carry easily to one of the worst now. His win rate is just 49% across the board. Now, one champion, thankfully, who hasn't been affected as much as Kog'Maw in 12.11, this is Lilia. And for Lilia, your base HP going down and your passive damage as well also going down based off the target's maximum HP. These are definitely nerfs, and Lilia's win rate as a result has dropped by around 1.6%, but it's still around 51% overall. The Liandry's nerfs as well would have hurt just a little bit, but still a very good champion, jungle, top lane. But one champion who won't be thanking Riot for the 12.11 changes, this is Master Yi. And a bit like Kog'Maw, his win rate has dropped 4%. He's gone from being one of the premier champs to one of the worst. I mean, his win rate across all ranks is still 49.5%, but the higher you go, the lower this goes. So in about Diamond and above at the moment, Master Yi's win rate is around 45%. So the HP growth decreased and your ease-based true damage on hit decreased because 12.10 was really about on hit and consistent damage. This really hurts Master Yi. Now, another champion in the jungle who has been hit by 12.11, this is Rengar, whose win rate has dropped by over 2%. So Rengar's base HP, a bit like Lilia, has gone down, so to 620, and your ultimate's cooldown at later ranks has been nerfed as well. But here's the thing, guys, if you run Ultimate Hunter, your win rate will still be worse because of the base HP nerf, but you can actually bypass the ultimate nerf by running this rune in the domination tree. So that's really the key to keeping Rengar OP in 12.11. But one champion who received a couple of nerfs just like Rengar, whose win rate has only gone down around 0.7%, this is Senna. So your Q slow down to 15% from 20%, and your slow duration is now scaling from 1 second to 2 seconds depending on the points in your queue, so it's no longer a flat 2 seconds. But the thing for Senna is that your scaling is still there. Because of your passive, because of your insane damage with a couple of items, the champion is still broken, and for a champion who is picked and banned an awful lot, it really goes to show how good she is. Now, next up we have Swain, who received 3 nerfs in 12.11, and you might even want to throw in the Liandry's Anguish nerf into the mix. So for Swain, your passive healing going down, your W's magic damage, the base damage at later ranks going down, and it's scaling less off your AP, and also your ultimate's healing, everything is down here. But the power for Swain is actually just the meta and how well it suits him. Kind of like I mentioned for Red Kayn, because fights are going to be prolonged and extended, this is ideal for Swain. So even if your damage and healing gets nerfed just a little bit, you're still going to be very difficult to take down, and the fact that Grievous wounds got nerfed in 12.11, so really your healing might even still be the same if you think about it, Swain is still a top tier champion, with his win rate being over 51% despite these nerfs. But one champion who got nerfed significantly in 12.11, this is Talia. Her win rate has dropped close to 4% to 47% overall, and that's because her base HP went down, the cooldown in your Q went up by 0.5 seconds, the damage in your rocks and your boulder, this is also down at later ranks, your E dealing less damage to monsters, your ultimate, you can't cast this during fights. These have put a massive dent into the updated Talia for 12.11, and a bit like Kog'Maw and Master Yi, she's gone from one of the best champions to being one of the worst in the blink of an eye. But one champion who is still holding on to the title of being one of the game's best champions despite getting nerfed, and he's received multiple nerfs this season, this is Veigar. So his base armor going down, well, this is kind of compensated because his armor per level is going up. So in the mid to late game, this is actually a buff more than anything, and even if your ease cooldown is down at early levels, does this really mean anything? It's still going to be 12 seconds of rank 5, which you're maxing second. So Veigar's utility, his damage, his agency, it's all still there. You might not be the best champion in the early game, but it's so easy to get out of it because it's the durability meta, and that's why his win rate has only dropped by 1%, still 52% overall. And next up, we have a champion who's very similar to Veigar, this being Wukong. His win rate has dropped 1%, but who really cares about this? It's still close to 53% overall, so even if your W's cooldown has increased at early ranks, who cares about this? You're only using this once anyway in fights, and your ease damage to monsters going down 20%? Yeah, okay, that means something, but you don't really need to farm jungle camps as Wukong. As long as you hit level 3, you should be sweet, and this 20% might knock a couple of seconds off you clearing camps. It's not going to be the end of the world in the majority of elos, so Wukong with Divine Sunder and Conqueror, still one of the nut champions. Now, as far as the 3 champions who got changed in 12-11, guys, we have Olaf, who we talked about earlier. His win rate, despite receiving adjustments, so to speak, those are the balance team's words, his win rate is close to 54% overall, so that's why he's getting Hotfix nerfed. Now, as for Fizz, his win rate has actually dropped a little bit, and the reason for this is because your HP per level got nerfed. You might be getting more mana, but the point is, you're not building any differently to what you were before. You can't get a Rocket Belt because you need mana, so it's still Luden's Tempers, so these mana buffs haven't really done anything. And of course, the final champion who got adjusted, guys, is Zeri, and her win rate, listen to this, because of these adjustments, increased 7.7% to 53% overall. This is the biggest win rate shift I have seen maybe ever. So the buffs to your damage, pair this with lethal tempo, and hopefully an Enchantress support who can buff you like a Lulu or a Yuumi. Zeri is unkillable at the moment, so the Hotfix nerf will reduce her power a little bit, but by how much? That's the real question here. So let me know in the comments, guys, any thoughts you have on the champion win rate changes. I would love to hear what you have to say, and of course, if you did enjoy the video, let us know by leaving a like down below, and until our next Season 12 upload, this has been Coach JIZZ. Peace.